Thank you all so much for making it. I look forward to this conversation because it's something we keep talking about. So let me put this in context. Welcome all of you, and welcome all of you over here listening in. Today we are diving into a topic that's shaping our future, artificial intelligence in India. With the country's tech scene exploding, we ask, what does the future hold for AI here? From Bengaluru's burgeoning startups to government initiatives like Digital India, AI is not just on the horizon, it's already transforming sectors from healthcare to agriculture. But what about the challenges? Will India lead the AI revolution, or will we face hurdles in privacy, in job displacement, and in the ethical use of artificial intelligence? Now, experts predict that AI could boost our GDP by billions, but the question remains, how will we manage the ethical implications and ensure inclusivity? Will our education system rise to train the needed talent? And crucially, can we craft policies that balance innovation with responsibility? Join us as we explore these exciting but, I dare say, daunting questions about India's AI journey. We've got super panelists, real experts on this. Puneet Chandok, President, Microsoft India and South Asia. Thanks, Puneet, very much for being with us. Manu Chopra, co-founder and CEO, Cardia AI. Dr. Pratyush Kumar, co-founder, Sarvam AI. And Ronnie Screwvala, familiar face, somebody we've all grown up with, co-founder and chairperson of Upgrad. Thank you, Ronnie, very much for being with us. So, I could talk about policy, we could talk about ethics, we could talk about jobs, we will. But I think for a larger audience, the question which everybody wants to know is that how is AI going to look like for us as users, let's say 5 years down the road? It's evolving so fast. So let me ask all of you that question. Would you like to start, Puneet?
AI in the next few years will be a guardian angel. It'll be a coach, it'll be a companion to all of us. It'll have a lot of intelligence, it'll have a lot of empathy, it'll have a lot of agency. I think it'll make all of us a lot more efficient and effective at what we do.
Empathy. So how smart is that? Because if you're getting into a very exciting theme already. Empathy.
I think technology, for the sake of, technology, of course, matters, but what matters is how technology feels, right? And I think where these agents and where this AI is headed is a lot more personality, a lot more context on who you are. And I genuinely believe in the next 5 years, it'll be Puneet plus Puneet's AI. So if somebody hires me, if I'm on LinkedIn as an example, I'll say it's Puneet plus Puneet's AI. It'll be you plus your AI.
All right.
And I think that's the world we're getting into.
Ronnie? 5 years from now.
I mean, if intelligence means artificial intelligence, it has to be a 2 plus 2 is equal to 22. And I think that's what it will be, because it's going to be a combination of both. And I think for all of us, we need to take it that it's going to be in that manner, rather than actually looking at it as going to be a threat. I think today everyone's looking at it much more from a threatening perspective. And again, as my favorite saying goes, overall, we need to take this on as more as an evolution, more than an sort of an apocalyptic event where we'll always keep dreading it. And if you differentiate between the two, I think it's going to evolve. I think 5-year statements today will be almost impossible. We'll need to be better than astrologers to actually talk about where that takes it.
So, Manu, the reason I thought I'd start this conversation is because I'm hooked on to Grok. No advertising contract, not yet at least, but I use it because it generates pictures for me. And so I decided to, I'm Bengali, parochial one at that. So I asked it to draw Newmarket in the 1920s, in the rainfall, with women street vendors, with a few old cars. And it came up with something absolutely incredible. And it gave me 3 or 4 options. I regenerated and it gave me something better. It suggested Twilight, so I clicked Twilight, and it had it in Twilight as well, in the rain. Now, this is absolutely incredible, which is why I asked the question, in 5 years from now, what more can AI do for us?
I mean, it's a very, it's not a good thing to be making predictions right now. Because I'll be like, 5 years from now, this will happen, and it happens tomorrow.
But is that the problem? Is it moving so fast now that we really can't look 5 years ahead?
I think, look, one of my favorite quotes about technology, if we step back, is from Kintaro Toyama. He says, technology is an excellent amplifier of human intent and capacity.
Yeah.
I think of AI the way Puneet is talking about it in terms of amplifying our intents and our capacities, right? So we've been playing around with deep research. It's absolutely phenomenal, right? The kind of things it can do, it accelerates the pace at which my team works. It allows us to do so much more for our communities. And I really believe, look, AI technologies that we're building, the kind of work that Pratyush is doing at Sarvam, this is really important because it just accelerates earning and learning opportunities for not just people like us on the stage, but for low-income communities all across the country, right? And I think it's our responsibility to make sure AI productivity is equitable, right? But I think the fact that it'll dramatically accelerate productivity, in my mind, is a given, right?
Ronnie had a point?
I just want to add that I think one thing for sure in 5 years is we won't be as wowed as we are right now. And the reason I say that is because right now I think it's all tough. I come from the storytelling world in my previous avatar, and I think the wow with which you explained that I fed it in and gave me these 3 fascinating stories, I think a lot of that will evolve. It'll become part of us. And I think that's something if we harness. So one of the things I definitely think in 5 years is we won't be that wowed with it in a good way, not in a bad way.
Right. But I am wowed for the moment. I mean, it can design music for me. You know, I can ask it, I can describe a certain type of music that I want, and it can do it for me. A few years back, I would say even a few months back, if we wanted information, the phrase we would use is, let me Google it. That's already obsolete. You no longer Google it necessarily. You can grok it, you can chat GPT it, you can deep seek it, whatever it is. Again, in your mind, 5 years from now, what's exciting which is coming up?
So one thing that is surprising about this area is that the surprises don't stop.
Right.
So I do not know if 5 years later you won't be wowed, right? And as a practitioner of the technology, so the technology is still very early in the evolution of any technology, just few years into it, right? What you are echoing is a sentiment of the user, but as a builder, there don't appear clear limitations on why this does not improve further, right? That's a scary and exciting thought simultaneously, right? But for me, what is most interesting is what Manu said, which is that this technology becomes a common denominator for everybody, right? Because at the bottom line, some of us are creating images, some of us are doing deep research, right, and improving productivity. But the 1.4 billion Indians being able to access healthcare, education, whenever they needed advice, mental advice even, I think making it common denominator, just like, for example, today the per capita consumption of data, India is a leader. The per capita consumption of generative AI, I would see India being the leader in 5 years, and it's because this technology will make everybody so much more capable and enjoy a better quality of life.
Let me ask one more basic question before we get into specifics. Johnny, this one is to you. Education. If there's AI, then, you know, the way you and I studied in school and in college and did our research, you don't need to do that anymore, right? I mean, that's the pessimist in me speaking. Because I can quite easily tell you, and this is the truth. I promise you, this is the truth. I've got about 8 or 9 questions. I looked up AI and I got them, right? How do you learn if you've got a machine doing those functions for you?
No, I think that's a little too far-fetched. I think it's also then destructive. So I think it's going to have to be coupled. You're looking there and you're looking at this as an add-on, but there is a lot of the other part of the day where you're doing a lot of your own logical self. So I think you just need to look at it from that perspective. I think we need conviction, actually. Right now you're talking about everything else from a caution point of view.
True.
If you just look at it with conviction, I don't think you're going to displace the schooling system. If you see what's happened in the last 50, 60, 70 years and overall in learning, there's a certain base camp that you would have to necessarily go to. So I'm not a subscriber where this is going to be completely replacive and the next generation, of course, every generation is getting wired in a different way in which they consume things. But some things I think will remain constant. I think the coupling of it rather than the decoupling is what's going to be important.
Puneet, the other, of course, common question is jobs. And I think it's, again, in a sense, a worry that people have addressed and have moved on. Will it take jobs is perhaps no longer the relevant question. It's how do jobs change given the reality of AI? And that has to do with skilling. So we'll keep skilling out for the moment, but to the basic fear that people have, AI is around, I'm going to get canned. How would you respond?
I think just sticking to Ronnie's framework of kind of just thinking about the positives of this technology, right? To me, I think this has the ability to reduce the cord between knowledge and agency. And let me explain to you, right? Which is, my favorite example is you go to any hospital in this country, the first year doctors are out of work, the 20th year doctors are out of time. Because everybody wants to go to the 20th year doctor. Same for teachers, same for lawyers, same for technologists. Yeah. And if you can create a co-pilot, if you can create an AI agent which brings as much information, as much expertise, as much judgment to the first year doctor and the first year teacher and the first year lawyer, imagine the work they can do. So it reduces the floor, it raises the ceiling, right? I think specifically on jobs, it'll both create new jobs and it'll change the nature of our jobs. And on creating new jobs, nobody better than Manu to talk about this because he's genuinely creating these jobs. I can talk about it, but he should talk about it. And then I think changing the nature of jobs, right? I think we're used to defining jobs as a title. Like, you're the chief editor of this thing, I'm the CEO of this organization. All our jobs are a collection of tasks. And I think this is time for us to reflect on, going back to your piece around saying these questions and the research work and the grunt work, that can be taken away. Now that frees you up to do so much more, right? So I think that to me is exciting. New jobs, changing the nature of jobs, and then cutting the cord between knowledge and agency, and especially for a country like India, getting people started much faster, much better to do a lot more work and a lot more amplification, as Manu said.
Manu, I'm coming to you on that, but in terms of specifics, I do know that specifically we are working on agriculture and AI already presently in the country. We are looking at AI being able to decipher fairly complicated medical reports and then advise people. We are looking at AI interpreting legal documents and then advising people as well. How is this fundamentally changing our lives in India right now?
Look, for our communities, information asymmetry is still a problem, right? And it goes back to what everyone is talking about, right? Like access to this information, that is still a challenge, right? We thought that internet would change that, right? It made a huge difference. It certainly changed all of our lives, right? But with access to these technologies, to this information in your language, through voice, the kind of work that so many people on the stage are doing, that's really, really critical. Right? To answer your, in general question, I think, look, the reason we need to approach this with optimism is important. I almost think of it as like, it's hard to demonstrate this with a mic, but I'm going to try. Think of this as like the kind of work that humans can do, right? That's all the work we've done in the past. A certain subset of this is the work that AI can do for us, right? Which is the work like coming up with questions. But because that's happened, now the kind of work we can do with AI is so much larger, right? One of my favorite thinkers on this topic is Eric Brynjolfsson from Stanford, who says that, if ancient Greeks automated all the labor known to them, there would be no work, but then there would be no NDTV Profit, there would be no vaccines, there would be no, several other things that we did because of the technologies that were created, right? So given that these basic needs will be taken care of, right? Access to healthcare, access to information is taken care of. The question very quickly becomes for us is how do we make sure the vast majority of our communities are able to use these tools to become more productive, right. to use them to actually make more money, to learn more stuff, to go ahead in their lives, to thrive, right? To just have full, complete, holistic lives. And I think there we are very excited about the kind of new jobs AI is creating. These jobs pay really well. We're able to train people in our communities to do these jobs, right? So I'm optimistic in general. It requires work. It requires us to create almost a just transition between what people were doing earlier and the new kind of stuff that we have to do. But I think of the opportunities here across ending information asymmetry, connecting people to what they need this like very quickly. I was flying into Bombay this morning and I saw these incredible mountains I'd never seen before. I took a photo and the first thing that I did was ask my GPT, what is this? And it told me exactly the wildlife sanctuary it is, right? Like these are very basic things, but they truly enable information discovery. And I really like what Puneet said about reducing the gap between knowledge and agency.
No, note to self, I'll do that next time. You had a point, Ronnie?
No, I wanted to calm down the temperature and the way we kind of look at that, right? Because I go a lot by my gut feeling. I don't think that's going to get replaced. I think I pride myself that I'm a culmination of the choices I make. That's not going to get changed. You're going to have that sense of acuteness of yourself to be able to make the choices. You make judgment calls. So if you look at all of that, then you look at the practical of how this is going to augment and not necessarily replace. You will just look at everything in a very different way. I think we're in that hyper mode today where we're going, oh my God, what is this going to do for all of us? Versus how much is it going to actually augment us? How much is it going to segregate and take a few things off the plate so that we can actually become even more smarter or being able to do what we want to do. And I think for India, it's an incredible opportunity. I mean, your central theme today is one of 2047, and I think this is one of the most powerful tools. It's a level playing field. Nobody's got a massive head start. I think those are the ones that I think should be more exciting for all of us to really look at.
You know, if we're talking about 2047, and thanks for bringing me back onto the theme, because I am tremendously excited at the prospects. You know, we have our model of made in India, Atmanirbharta, which is all very well, but what about, and Ronnie, this is to you, India building for the world. Is that something that's possible? Because there are those who, for example, look at large language models, LLMs, and say, you know, it might work for some, it may not necessarily work for us. But if India has a certain model going forward in terms of AI, what, in your opinion, should it be?
See, I think it is a mindset change, right? We have been an arbitrage economy for a fair period of time. We do have 600 million people that are in rural India, have changed. We have evolved in terms of ambitions and aspirations. So I think we're all at a good cusp enough for us to be able to take this. So I think our next road is to create more intellectual property, to be at the higher end of it. And I think that possibility is very, very much there. And the main part is if we start looking at only the top of the pyramid, we won't go very far. We'll miss the opportunity. And the bottom of the pyramid is not something we can really tackle right now. But that 400, 500 million people, which is larger than the population of most of the developed countries, if you can harness them with basic knowledge, evolved knowledge, see, because otherwise we just think AI is for coders and for engineers, but it's actually for everybody. So the minute we build that into our horizontal versus the vertical, I think the mindset will change.
I'll come to that in a moment. Pratyush, in as much as we talk about applications and the software changing, there is a very important aspect of all of this is the hardware, the computational abilities which exist in India, the supercomputers, the availability of semiconductors. If India going towards 2047 decides to experiment with different models, how capable are we at having that hardware backend?
I'll just take a minute to talk about jobs because I feel that it's moving so fast that I don't think anybody is engineering things to be the way we want it to be, right? So I'm also very optimistic. I think we'll land in a better place given where we are and where our per capita income is. But what I want to also highlight is that no one knows. Right, so this is a big social experiment we are going with as a globe. We're experimenting with a technology that's moving much, much faster, 2 degrees faster than other technologies, and it seems to have an impact on certain sections of the economy which are typically thought of as defensible. Right, so I just wanted to put that out there.
Sure.
I think we need more dialogue that is grounded in policy, technology, economics that understands this and actually lands us in a place that we'll do well. Right, about hardware. The way I see it is it's a set of raw materials that you need to run AI. Today it is the talent to build the models, the talent to build applications on top of the models that make it usable across the country. If you have these 2 things, then you would need to use these models at scale, and that happens on top of hardware. And as you know, the most important hardware right now is the NVIDIA chips, which I think the United States is now controlling how it gets diffused across the world. There are other attempts at building chips as well. And the layer below that is actually power, right? So these will be the key raw materials, the talent to build the models and to use the models, and then the hardware that can accelerate these models and the power that is required to power these to actually run the models at scale. And we will have to build at all 4 layers, right? And India has to build chips going ahead. We were really behind in the last generation of semiconductor revolution. Even in power, we have actually one of the few countries to have a unified grid. But you need to have nuclear reactors. This is a well-established factor. There's enough money going into the US for that. So these are the 2nd, 3rd degree investments we'll have to make, and all of them are infrastructure. But now is the time when we go out, build these models, and I think in the next year or 2, we should be making India one of the largest consumers of this technology. So we stand up and are given notice in the global scheme of things.
Just one more point on this. We've seen the Chinese DeepSeek model come up recently. It's fascinating in terms of its ability, and it's also interesting because It resulted in a crash in the markets of NVIDIA and other chip makers because apparently the Chinese and this particular company is able to achieve realistic results on the basis of far less computing power. Optimization of hardware going forward, is that perhaps the best way to maximize the potential of the technology?
Yes, there are two parts to that. By the way, it was very interesting to see how much the DeepSeek moment got caught up in day-to-day parlance. There were people who are uncles and aunts asking about DeepSeek. Maybe it was the origin of where it came from that made it so interesting. But there are two parts to it. One is the cost of training the model, and the second is the cost of sort of serving the model or using the model. The training of the model, they showed that it can be a much smaller number, but that's somewhat debatable. But that's not where most of the money goes. Most of the money going ahead will be in running these models at scale,
right.
And using smaller models which can be served cheaply, fastly, etc. And I think that's where most work is. In fact, the compute problem that you mentioned is also about making chips which are more customized for this workload and make it cheaper. And in fact, that is the number one problem for India, which is to massify this technology. We need to bring down the cost of serving these models at scale.
Right.
And that's where we should be focusing the most.
Ronnie, let's talk about upskilling and the need, again, based on what a lot of you have actually said, that, it's not a certain group of individuals who need to be reskilled or upskilled. Upskilling and reskilling has to take place everywhere. How do we maximize AI by upskilling?
See, firstly, I think leadership needs to harness it. Right now, it's sitting on an HR desk. I think it needs to sit on leadership desks.
Right.
Firstly, I think if that mandate comes in, it's different. Second, most people are looking at it again as a tick box, and therefore completion of a course is becoming actually now the absorption and the outcome of that is going to be. Because I think in the workforce today, you're not looking now at the bottom 10% and figuring out how to weed them out. You're actually looking at the top 40, 50%, and the rest of them are getting less relevant. So I think if you figure that mandate out, and everyone realizes that it's proactive and you need to be there, I think it's a leadership mandate that has to come in and not an HR tick box. I think that's the starting point with.
Puneet, how will AI be disruptive to business in India?
Listen, there's a beautiful quote by somebody a long time back. It said, intelligence is a beautiful property bestowed on human beings. I don't think that's true anymore. It's not just human beings now who've got intelligence, right? So we are, in a way, starting to manufacture intelligence. Now, to your point around how does that disrupt or create opportunities for companies? And I call this a numerator-denominator problem, which is there are massive opportunities on the numerator side, which is create top line, right? Which is create products and markets that you couldn't earlier. Like if you go to e-commerce websites today, if you want to go to Goa, in the previous world, you would say, I want to buy shorts and I want to buy a shirt and I want to buy slippers. Now you just say, I want to go to Goa. And it gives you the entire, and suddenly you're buying more.
Right.
So I think, so there's a bit of a top line opportunity for companies in India to sell more and build products and serve markets that they couldn't serve earlier. And there's a denominator opportunity around efficiency and productivity, everything that we've been speaking about, like GitHub Copilot, right? Like Infosys has written 7 million lines of code. Now, 7 million lines of code written by AI, not human beings. And human beings are quality checking it and amplifying it. But how do you drive productivity? How do you drive efficiency? So massive opportunity both on the numerator and denominator for companies in India to, it's already happening. Look at Apollo Hospitals, they're building co-pilots for doctors. Bajaj Finance, they're looking at customer service in a completely different way. RailTel is looking at public sector and saying, listen, how do we really embed AI pretty much across the public sector in India? So I would not say disrupt. I think it just creates massive opportunities for companies in India to leapfrog. And as India becomes AI first, like our companies should become AI first and build not just for India, but for the world.
Well, I'd like to thank you all very much for being with us. We could keep talking for the next 2 or 3 hours, but then we've got other panelists and other sessions. But it is absolutely fascinating. And I think the message from all of our panelists is that the technology has to be embraced. We can be pessimistic, we can be questioning about it, but perhaps we need to look at how it is going to be a key part of our cycle of growth going forward as we work towards 2047 Viksit Bharat. Thank you all very much for being with us. Thank you.